She had a way of making every one of us feel like we were the most important person in the room. We spent a lot of time this week talking about the justice she deserves, but today is about the love she gave. Alexis was a protector. Whether it was the kids she cared for, the friends she stood up for in high school, or her beautiful son, Zaylin, she was a safe harbor for everyone. She once told me she wanted to name her future daughter after me. That is the kind of friend she was. She loved so deeply that she wanted to weave her friends into the very fabric of her future. And while that future was stolen from her, her heart is very much alive in all of us. She lives on in the way that Dean's daughter carries her name as a middle name. She lives on in the stories we will tell Zaylin every single day. And she lives on in the treehouse we'll build together in our hearts for our children to play in together.
Yes, indeed. We love you, Alexis.
23 years old, that's it. That's all the time Alexis Walls got on this earth. Her son was still in diapers. She was 6 months away from starting college. She had a whole future mapped out, a degree, a career, a life she had built from nothing, and the man who was supposed to love her took all of it away in the span of a few minutes and 15 bullets. 15. Not one, not two. 15 separate trigger pulls from a man who claimed to love her over something he could never prove because it was never real. This is the story of Alexis Walls, and it deserves to be told in full. Alexis wasn't just alive, she was living. People who knew her didn't reach for quiet words when they described her. They called her a hurricane, not the destructive kind, the kind that fills a room the second she walks in. Pure energy, constant laughter, the type of woman who never met a stranger, who sat with the shy kid at lunch every single day in school just so they wouldn't have to sit alone, who showed up to her friends' family softball games just to be in the mix. Her family, her mother, her father Thomas, her siblings, they all said the same thing. From the moment she was born, she brought light. She was the youngest of 3 children, and she wore that role like a crown, the baby of the family who somehow managed to take care of everybody else. She worked in childcare, met her best friend Tiffany during a job interview, and Tiffany said the connection was immediate. It was just easy to be around her. Within months, they had gone from co-workers to sisters. They were already planning a future together, talking about their children growing up side by side, a treehouse connecting their backyards. Alexis told Tiffany she wanted to name a future daughter after her. That's the kind of love she carried, so deep, so forward-looking, that she wanted to weave the people she loved into the very fabric of her future. She was raising an 18-month-old son named Zaylin, and Zaylin wasn't just any toddler. He was autistic, which meant Alexis wasn't simply his mother in the conventional sense. She was his entire world, his anchor, the one person who understood him without needing an explanation, who could read what he needed before he could communicate it himself. She had built a language with her son that nobody else spoke fluently yet, and she was planning to go further. In August 2025, just 6 months after her death, Alexis was supposed to start college. She had been sitting at kitchen tables with family, working through applications, figuring out the paperwork, mapping out the path. She had chosen her major, computer science. She had somewhere she was going. At 23 years old, with a toddler on her hip and a future in her sights, Alexis Walls was just getting started. Brandon Michael Dickerson was 29 when he became Alexis's common-law husband, 6 years older. They met during the pandemic in 2020 when she was around 18 or 19 and the world had gone quiet and people were clinging to whoever made them feel less alone. From the outside, it looked like something real. A church-going couple bonding over faith and family and country music, bonfire nights, off-key singing, a baby, a home, a life taking shape. Brandon presented himself as a family man, God-fearing, grounded, the kind of steady that a young woman building a future might mistake for safe. But Brandon had a history that told a different story. Before Alexis, he had been in a relationship that lasted 8 years, and when it ended, he didn't let go quietly. He publicly begged to get back together. She refused because she had already seen his violent episodes up close and decided her life was worth more than staying. She got out while she still could, and then Brandon found Alexis. At first he hid who he was behind charm and scripture and the performance of a good country boy. But over time, the mask started slipping in ways that were easy to dismiss until they weren't. He posted TikTok videos about the government provoking alien civilizations with enough sincerity to make you uncomfortable. He believed CERN's Large Hadron Collider was opening portals to hell and releasing demons into physical form. He explained this at length, in detail, on camera, to anyone who would listen. He talked about how scientists were trying to bring these demons into flesh. Weird, alarming, but not yet something you could point to and say, that man is going to kill someone. Then there was the gun. Brandon wasn't simply a legal gun owner exercising his Second Amendment rights. He was consumed by that weapon. He carried it everywhere, to Walmart, on the couch, reportedly even to the bathroom. It had stopped being a tool and become a personality. He celebrated Texas's constitutional carry laws on social media. He talked about firearms the way other people talk about faith. And in one video, in his own words, he said it plainly, "The devil seeks to devour and destroy. I use my sights to seek out my targets. When I squeeze that trigger, that round goes in a straight line. And at the end of that line, it will devour and destroy whatever it hits." He said those words on camera, publicly, and nobody put it together until it was too late. Alexis started seeing the red flags, the jealousy that moved in quietly at first, a question about her phone, an accusation about where she had been, who she had talked to, what took so long at the store. His jokes began to feel less like humor and more like threats. The control tightened, the suspicion deepened, and at some point, Alexis Walls looked at the life she was living and made a decision. She called off the engagement. She told Brandon they could co-parent Zaylin. She told him she wanted things to stay peaceful for their son's sake. But she was done. She tried to walk away from him, and that is when Brandon Dickerson decided that if he couldn't have her, she wouldn't get to have herself either. In the early hours of February 7th, 2025, Brandon came to the house on the 500 block of East 18th Street in Bryan, Texas. He demanded to see her phone. Alexis reminded him, again, that they were no longer together, that she didn't owe him access to her life, that this was over. That's when he reached for the gun that had never left his side. He shot Alexis Walls 15 times, 15 separate decisions, 15 moments where he could have stopped, put the weapon down, walked out that door and let her live. He didn't stop. He kept pulling that trigger until there was nothing left to pull. Their son Zaylin was inside the house while it happened, 18 months old. He didn't understand what the sounds meant, didn't know that his mother, his anchor, his whole world was dying just feet away from him. But he was there, he heard it. And some part of that will live in him forever in ways none of us can fully measure. When it was over, Brandon picked up his phone. It was around 12:30 in the morning. He didn't call for an ambulance, didn't scream that there had been an accident, didn't beg anyone to come save her. He called 911 and told the dispatcher with complete calm exactly what he had done. He had just shot and killed the mother of his child. When officers arrived at the scene minutes later, they found Brandon outside, lying in the street on his stomach, waiting for them, like surrender had been part of the plan from the beginning. No standoff, no drama, no attempt to run or hide or deny. He had already made his confession before they ever got there. Inside, they found Alexis, and they found Zaylin, physically untouched, in a home that would never feel safe again. Officers stepped into that house and found exactly what Brandon had told them they would. The scene required very little interpretation. This wasn't self-defense. There were no signs of a struggle that could justify 15 gunshots, no weapon near Alexis, no indication she had threatened him. The evidence told one story and one story only, a man who had made up his mind before he ever walked through that door. Detectives interviewed Brandon, and he gave them everything. He talked about the argument, about his suspicions, about pulling the trigger again and again. There was no mystery here, no whodunit. The man responsible sat across from them and explained, in his own words, exactly why he had decided Alexis Walls needed to die. He was arrested on the spot, charged with murder. And then forensics confirmed what the scene had already suggested. There was no evidence of infidelity, no messages, no proof of any kind that Alexis had been unfaithful, not a single piece of evidence to support what Brandon had told himself. He had shot her 15 times over something that existed entirely inside his own mind, built from insecurity and jealousy and a rage he had been carrying long before Alexis ever walked into his life. While detectives processed the scene, Alexis's family was getting the worst phone call of their lives. Their daughter was gone. Their grandson had been in that house when it happened, and the man responsible was someone they had welcomed in, someone they had shared holidays with, someone who had sat at their table and held their grandchild. Make it make sense. You build a life with someone, you bring a child into the world together, you try to leave with your dignity intact, and he decides the home you shared should be your final resting place because he couldn't prove something he only imagined. Alexis's community refused to let her disappear into a police report. They went back to East 18th Street, not to relive the trauma, to reclaim it. Friends, family, neighbors, people who had sat next to her in class and worked beside her and laughed with her and loved her. They all came back to the place where it happened and they turned it into something sacred. They brought purple balloons. They brought letters they were writing to the district attorney to be kept on file for every future parole hearing, so that Brandon Dickerson would face organized opposition every single time his name came up. And they brought Zaylin, who walked up to the front steps of that house and placed flowers down for his mama with his small hands, not fully understanding what he was doing, but somehow knowing it mattered. Tiffany spoke from the spot where her best friend had spent her last moments. She said if she closes her eyes and thinks of Alexis, the first thing she hears is her voice, probably talking a mile a minute, laughing, making sure everyone around her was okay. She said Alexis had a way of making every single person feel like the most important person in the room. She said Alexis was a protector for the kids she cared for the friends she stood up for in high school, for Zaylin, a safe harbor for everyone who needed one. And she said that while Alexis's future had been stolen, her heart was still very much alive in everyone she left behind. At exactly 12:30 in the morning, the time her community had marked as the moment she was taken, they released those purple balloons over East 18th Street and watched them rise until they disappeared. Brandon Dickerson sat in Brazos County Jail while prosecutors built a case they barely needed to build. He had already confessed. The evidence was airtight. There was no angle for reasonable doubt, no version of events that helped him, no jury in the world that would hear this case and find their way to acquittal. When it came time to face a courtroom, Brandon took a plea deal. Guilty, no trial, no jury, just an admission on the record that he had murdered Alexis Walls. On February 3, 2026, nearly 1 year to the day after he killed her, Brandon Dickerson, now 30 years old, stood before Judge Kyle Hawthorne in the 85th District Court in Brazos County, Texas. His attorneys said he was sincerely remorseful, said he accepted full responsibility. The judge handed down 50 years in prison, the maximum, and when that sentence was read, it sounded like justice until you sit with the reality that it doesn't bring her back. Doesn't undo the trauma, doesn't give Zaylin his mother, doesn't give Alexis her degree, her career, her daughter she was going to name after her best friend, her treehouse, her 60 more years. 50 years is the most the law could give, and it still isn't enough. Zaylin lives with his grandparents now. He's growing up in a home that should have had 3 generations under one roof, but only has 2, because his father chose his pride over his child's future. That little boy will never remember his mother's voice, won't remember how she made him feel safe when the world was too loud and too much, won't remember being her entire world. He'll only know her through photographs and stories and the people around him who are working every single day to make sure she isn't forgotten, telling him who she was, what she wanted, how much she loved him, how she used to check on him constantly and speak his language when no one else could. The community made a promise at that memorial. They said Alexis's hopes and dreams were going to live through them, that they were going to make sure this didn't happen to anyone else they knew, that they were going to stand up. That justice meant more than a verdict. It meant letters to the DA, it meant showing up, it meant making sure Brazos County knew that this community would no longer stay silent when their own were taken. Alexis Walls was 23 years old. She was a mother, a daughter, a best friend, a future computer science student, a hurricane who filled every room she walked into. She deserved 60 more years. She deserved to watch Zaylin grow up. She deserved to build the life she had planned. Instead, she got 15 bullets from a man who claimed to love her. Love is not supposed to come with a body count. And if you are in a relationship that feels like it's tightening around you, if the questions are coming faster, if the jealousy has become something you tiptoe around, if you are explaining yourself to someone who has already decided not to believe you, please reach out. In the Bryan area, contact Phoebe's home at 900-797-755355. Nationally, the domestic violence hotline is available 24 hours a day at 1-800-799-7233. Free, confidential, there for you. Rest easy, Alexis. October 9th, 2001 to February 7th, 2025. We've got Zaylan from here.